Canada's interest rate cut, because Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem lowered the key interest rate from 2.75% to 2.5% today. It's the first time that the interest rate has been lowered since March earlier this year, down significantly from last year. And it all comes as Canada's inflation rate ticked up in August to 1.9%. So on days like this, we turn to the CBC senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong, and he joins us there now. So Peter, the first interest rate cut from the Bank of Canada since March. I mean, what does today's decision signal for Canada's economy? It's probably not good.
Yeah, look, I mean, nobody cuts interest rates because the economy is doing great, right? You do it because there's trouble and there's signs of weakness, and there are signs of weakness everywhere. It has been evolving slowly since April, and there was some questions over the summer whether maybe we had seen the worst of the impact of the trade war and the tariffs and the uncertainty, and yet we're still sort of in a position where the job market is incredibly weak. GDP actually contracted through the second quarter of the year, through April, May, and June, and there's not a real sense of what might lift us out of that. So the bank really kind of had to pivot from concerns about inflation still being kind of sticky and a little bit higher than even the Bank of Canada would like, to concerns over growth. And that's why you see the cut. And really interesting messaging, David, about, usually there's some kind of line in there about, if the economy continues to weaken, that the bank will be prepared to lower its key overnight lending rate further. None of that today, because Tiff Macklem really doesn't want to get pinned down on the specifics of when or how he might cut next.
Okay, so, and you can understand why, right? The country's still being hit by the U.S. tariffs. Inflation's up 1.9%. Let's face it, that's not, the catastrophe levels we saw a few years ago, but unemployment over 7%. This is definitely problematic. So how does all of that play into things moving forward?
It creates this really delicate balancing act, because on the one hand, he's got the information we have. He knows where we are. He knows the economic data that have come in so far. But we've got a federal budget coming, and he's going to have to make a decision in October before we see that federal budget. There's the trade issues that change from day to day. That, you've got legal challenges in the United States. You've got the re-beginning of the starting of the maybe whatever's going to happen with CUSMA, USMCA, that seems to be moving forward. And then the whims of Donald Trump. He could remove the exemptions. He could suspend tariffs. You never know what's going to happen. And so what you've really got is a very cautious central bank. Just take a listen to how Tiff Macklem sort of framed a large part of this decision.
Tariffs are weakening the Canadian economy. You can see that very acutely in the directly affected sectors. We are proceeding carefully. We are going to be balancing those risks, and we don't want Canadians to have to worry about big increases in the cost of living.
And, you made the point, David, 1.9%, that's not bad. It's right basically at target of that 1% to 3% range the Bank of Canada likes. But core inflation's a little higher than they'd like. Food inflation's still around 3.4%, 3.5%. It's not all the way tamed. It's not a perfect situation. It never is. And so that's why he's trying to really be cautious.
Yeah, and Peter, we got data from the U.S. today, right? It's not just Canada's inflation. U.S. inflation up in August. Their economy also going in a difficult direction. I mean, what could that mean for us here in Canada?
Well, so two things that it could mean. One, you've got the central banks moving in the same direction, which always makes things easier, right? When the Fed is moving one way and the Bank of Canada is moving another, that can cause some trouble. But it's an interesting sort of moment in time, because I think for the Canadian economy, we started to see the hit of tariffs and the trade war and the uncertainty back in April, and we've been building to this. The U.S. administration to this day says there's never going to be a cost of the tariffs. It's only upside. There's no problem. There's no damage that's going to come as a result of this, in spite of the fact that we're starting to see some data in the United States. The jobs market is incredibly weak. There's some softening in economic growth. There's some real concern, and the sense that these tariffs have only the pain of the tariffs has only been delayed. It hasn't been averted. And if that's the case, then the United States is heading into a 3 or 4 month period where they're going to see an acceleration of that damage and of that pain and of the consequences of those tariffs. And remember, the Bank of Canada is dealing with an overnight rate that was at 2.75, is now at 2.5. the federal funds rate was at 4.25 to 4.5. It's now down to 4 to 4.25. They've got a lot more room to get out of that. They're still in a quite restrictive zone. And so there's probably, we're going to see more movement in both central banks, but it'll be interesting to see how the U.S. Fed continues to manage that message, especially now they have a new member in Stephen Myron, who's the former head of the Council of Economic Advisors from Donald Trump. So, the politicization of the Fed is also part and parcel of what's happening in the United States and economic data and how that all sort of plays together.
Yeah, and when those inventory stockpiles start to run out at the start of the new year, look out on what's going to happen there. All right, Peter, always appreciate it. The CBC's Peter Armstrong. Warning of considerable economic uncertainty that it still remains.
After remaining resilient to sharply higher U.S. tariffs, global growth is now showing signs of slowing. U.S. consumers are cautious, employment gains have slowed. U.S. inflation has picked up. The Canadian economy is being affected by both U.S. tariffs and the unpredictability of U.S. trade policy. GDP declined 1.6% in the second quarter. Exports to the United States fell sharply. Tariffs are having a profound effect on several key sectors. Business investment contracted in the second quarter. Businesses are also concerned that demand in Canada will weaken as the economic fallout broadens.
Okay, so that's the really gloomy economic backdrop for Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget, one that the government has said will have a substantial deficit, a statement that prompted this exchange during question period today.
How big is the deficit that the Prime Minister is running?
That budget will contain the biggest investment in this country's future in a generation. Building homes, building new port infrastructure, new trade corridors, new energy infrastructure, building the strongest economy in the G7.
Okay, so how does the federal government account for all of those economic challenges that the country is facing in this budget? That's what we're going to talk